In a fire truck, the key here is that water freezes. When water freezes, it expands and it breaks things. That's our problem. So the key things that you don't want to break on a fire engine are your pump, the red thing in this case. Sometimes they're black, they're red. So you don't want to break your pump head. You don't want that to freeze. The valves themselves, especially tucked back in there a little ways, those will get water in them. They'll freeze and they'll either deform, which is actually more common in the really good high quality valves that we have, is they'll deform. But when they deform, they leak. They still work, but they kind of work, but they leak. Or you'll actually break them, which I have seen happen. And there's a couple techniques to deal with that. And the next thing you tend to get a problem with, the gauge has a really thin little metal sensor on the back of it. So you want to get the water out of that, because if that freezes, it'll deform the sensor. When you run across an engine that shows pressure when it doesn't have any pressure, it's usually because the gauge froze. So those are probably the most expensive things to fix. The rest of it, rarely do you break pipe. Occasionally some of those unions will go, but they're pretty easy, and sometimes some of the parts and pieces in it. Nonetheless, if you are winterizing an engine, the key is to just get all the water out. You don't have to get all of the water out. In fact, you can't get all of the water out. So you cannot get all the water out. I think that's where I left off. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get every drop of it out of there. If you sat there with a blow dryer and blew warm, dry air through it, eventually you could, but it won't happen. You just need to get the bulk of it out so it doesn't freeze, expand, and break something. That's the key. So there's a couple different levels of winterized. Winterized and fire ready is a good one to be aware of. That means all of your plumbing's drained out and your tank is still full of water. So right now our tank's still full of water. We're actually completely fire ready. That would be open, and in this case we're going to close our number one, and that shuts the tank off to the rest of the system, and you just drain the water out. So pop these guys. Now let it start pouring. Now you get water trapped in different places, and remember there's check valves in there, so you got to pop your discharges too. You might want to step aside when we open this one. I don't know how much pressure's gonna. Okay, not bad. And it takes a while. I like to park at angles, driving around. If I'm really getting really thorough, I'll do all kinds of little tricks to make it happen. The idea is to get as much of that water as you can to run out. As much water as possible to run out of the system. So look here, I got my number two. I probably don't really need to worry about that at the moment. We'll deal with that later. You can check and see if it changes the way something flows and it doesn't. Water won't flow backwards out of your tank, out of that number two valve, your pump tank, because there's a check valve behind it, between it and the tank, so it won't do that. You can pop this cap up here and it gives you a little airflow, but it's not really necessary. And what else we got? All right, so that got a good chunk of it, and you have a master drain. So master drain drains down there, and that runs to it's a valve under the truck that has a whole bunch of hoses that go to it. And when you pull this out, it opens the valve to all of those hoses, and it grabs that yellow line that's on the back or underneath the pump head. So it drains your pump head out, and it hits most of the low spots in the plumbing. So there's a line here on that return to tank. I think there's a line, there's a line off the back of both discharge where they curve. I believe that's where that drain is. It's been a while since I dug through it. And looking at this, it's a BFX truck. It's built pretty much exactly the same as the U models, the utility bed models. So we did a thing where we traced all of the hoses by color, so that if you wanted to know what they did, you could figure it out. Everything's drained there. That right there. Okay, there's a manifold drain. I'm trying to remember what the manifold drains. The answer is I don't remember, but they're both labeled number 11. So I believe that actually comes in and drains, I think it drains right here in front of the foam system. And that would make it under pressure at times because it's in front of the check valve, but I believe that's what that one goes to. I'd have to go double check that other video. Okay, so everything's pretty much drained. The only thing that we really have water in now is, I always look top to down. So coming off the pump head's the top piece, that should be drained out. That line should be drained out. This line should be drained out. There's probably a little bit of water pooled in here, but there is a low spot here and there's a drain line in it. The one that's easy to forget, even though it's really out in the open, is that Y strainer. Wow, when was the last time that came off? Letting it rinse the dirt out of it.
That's the rock trap, right?
Yes.
The tank's still full, right?
Correct. It would appear you guys have been pulling water out of a gravelly water source and that your rock trap's working. See in here? Holy moly. Your rock trap works. And it's got the big holes one. Oh, but it got to get crushed to get it to fit. Okay. Big holes, bigger holes. Way better than the tiny mesh screen. Place with this if you can. It's cut at a little bit of an angle. Obviously it didn't fit anyway, so it got jammed in there. But that's a place where a lot of water gets trapped. And if you don't do it, it'll break the, it'll freeze and it'll pop this cap loose, and then it'll leak air there. You won't be able to get it to prime. What else has water in it? One more spot.
Gauges.
Gauges. Okay, there's two more spots. I have no idea where the gauge drain is on this, but we're gonna find it.
I think it's this brass tab right
Yep.
here.
And it should be like a T that unscrews. Oh no, it's just a quarter turn. Wow. Okay, gauge. So if I not fall on my face. Behind the gauge is this little quarter turn. Sometimes those are set to, and even this one might be, are set to the master drain too. When you pull the master drain, the whole thing goes. You don't have to do it. And that's it. You're technically winterized. If you were to stay fire ready, park it for the night, and it might freeze, you just want to quarter turn all your valves. And you should be good to go right there. We want to get into a full winterization for the night, you know, shut that thing completely down. You would do a few more things, which we will do next. But The reason we quarter turn is if you look inside that valve and you try and get it to focus, there's water inside the valve. And like I said, you cannot get all the water out. So when we blow things out with air, we will get more of the water out, and you still can't get all the water out. So if you have it completely opened, if you take this ball apart, it has a flat edge on it. That flat edge right there, that flat edge fits into a hole on the bottom. You get water back into that, and that'll freeze and break the outside of the housing for the valve. And if you crack that quarter turn, that gives the water somewhere to escape when it freezes. So it can freeze like that, and you won't be able to move the valve because it'll be frozen solid, but it won't freeze and break the valve. That's the key. Any questions?
Why don't you let them empty the tank?
Because the tank, okay, so there's one valve up against the tank that's still closed, right? And it still has water trapped in there, and it could freeze and break that valve, except that there's just giant patch of water sitting on top of it. And the bigger the piece of water, the colder it has to get even the edges of it to freeze. So that tank of water keeps that valve from freezing and breaking in general. And this would be winterized for the night from about now till we park the engine for the year. You can winterize it like this, and you can still go fight fire. All you have to do is close these and open this, and you're back in service. That's all it takes.
So long-term winterization, you have to empty.
Long-term winterization, you empty the tank, and really it's no different than that. You don't even really have to put antifreeze in it anymore because there's a tank or a pump head drain. I like to do it anyway because I grew up parking my fire engines in really, really cold, frozen, unheated sheds in the middle of winter, covered in snow. So I just kind of go overboard with it. And it doesn't take much. A splash of antifreeze, preferably Sierra or something like that. Just a splash of that in there, you're good to go. That's all it takes. Anything else? What did I miss? Chris? Rusty. So the next step would be to fully winterize the entire system as much as we can. In which case, I close that number 2 just because I'm going to put water back in the system. It doesn't matter, it's going to drain out anyway. And we drain the tank. There should be a drain valve underneath the tank, and we want to open that too. The reason is, the tank's a box, right? And at the bottom of that box is another box, a smaller box. And it has some baffling in it. So your pickup, where you actually pull the water from, is in a recessed little box underneath the main tank. And draining the water out of this will drain your tank down to about the level of the top of that. You want to get the rest of that water out of the bottom. Now, I've never looked at a P model. Maybe it's not like that. I'm not sure. I know on the utility body ones there's that recess. For this, they have to cut a hole in the deck of the platform of the flatbed, and I'm guessing they did. And we'll look. So, yes, there is a gravity drain at the bottom of that. It's bolted right to where the primer is, where the electric primer is. It's a quarter turn, like circular valve handle, and it's got a hose that goes to up to the tank as far as I can tell. Primer, tank drain. Wetness. And then we wait until it drains. Okay, so everything's open, everything's draining, and yes, it's still draining. It takes forever. So usually I open everything up, park it on a little bit of a hill, and go eat lunch. Come back in a while. But I think, yeah, the only thing left that's really draining is the tank. So we can start moving on. That tank, like I said before, there's you got the big box that is the tank, and then you have a little box at the bottom where your pickup is.
Where was that part?
The tank drain. You have to climb under in the center of the truck and down to where you can see. Circular valve, or yeah, circular valve that you
Really, what
turn and open.
the chunk where it fell over.
So next we go. All right, everything is
Turn the lens off.
is drained out. So I close everything up. And I want to put air to it. So we need to get the adapter for an air chuck, go onto a 2-inch, and go grab an air hose. We'll see that. Homemade air chuck. So it's just a cap. Drilled a hole in it, tapped it for an air connector. That's it. Pretty simple. Brass is actually a little easier than the aluminum. That's in. What is this cap? That's interesting. Fit right over. That's not gonna work. Still not gonna work. There we go. 2-inch MPSH to reducer to an air chuck. That'll do it.
Don't pick up.
So I like to start with everything closed, and then blow out each piece independently. And I know that. Okay, Alon. I need that. Here it is. Exactly. And all we do is pump air into the system. Everything looks like it's closed. And it starts to show me pressure. Okay, so that's working. And then you can start blowing things out bit by bit. So, unstrap this out. Blows out a lot better. Good. Okay, and air is going through somewhere. Right there. So that's the bypass, number 17. Okay, is that open? It is. It's amazing how much water will end up in your booster line. So the reality is, I mean, it's just like air in mist at this point. And your booster line's made out of rubber, and you're gonna have a little bit left in there, and it's gonna be okay. All right, booster line's good. 5 minutes. You can just leave it there for now. All right, so then what do we look at? There is no like order that you have to follow here, but since we started here, I like to go, okay, a couple things. I should have said this before. Follow the way the water's supposed to go. There are a lot of people that'll blow out their system through the live reel. They'll blow the air in through the live reel, and they're blowing all that water back out the discharge side, and there's check valves. So if you follow the way the water goes and you go in through your suction, your number 8, you'll actually get to all the water, and you can blow a lot more of it out. That's at least my take on it, my feeling on it. And then I usually start high and work my way low, just because water falls with gravity. So I could go to the drains on that, but I want the air pressure to come down first. So I'll just keep bringing it down. I hit a number 2. Build out a little bit of pressure and you're just blowing the air out of the valves at that point. Okay, watch out. Here, you can man that for a minute. Good. Okay. I will blow my number 1 out backwards. Because it's just air. I don't do that with water because it'll actually damage the baffling in your pump. And where are we at? 100 psi. So. There it goes. So I dropped all the pressure out and then I shut this valve and then I open this and your manifold drain. I don't want to hit that with just a ton of pressure. It's all small stuff and I don't need to. So I just crack that and you can hear it coming out underneath. And grab the gauge drain. Okay, and that's all blown out. That should be it. So what else has water in it we didn't get drained out and blown out? Got one thing. Gauges, we got the gauges. I crawled up there and opened it. Primer. Should be everywhere. You can, at this point, foam unit and the pump head are the only other things you can start messing with. So, on the pump head, you can, hand that to me. Oh, it's loose. On the pump head, you can pop this cap. You can pour a splash of antifreeze in there if you have any. But it's not absolutely critical. It is drained. It shouldn't freeze up hard enough to break anything. But the nice thing about putting a little bit of antifreeze in there is it gives it a little bit of lubrication. There's a lot of cast aluminum parts in there, so if you get any rust buildup, they're just little chunks of it. Just a little bit of lubrication is nice. Anything? This is not the ideal thing to use, but it's okay. This is regular old antifreeze, and I'm going to put a tiny, that's it. That was like a teaspoon. And it's just a little bit of lubrication. This stuff is supposed to be Is this premix? Coolant, antifreeze. Use pre-mixed and preferably Sierra. That way if you spray it out on the ground later, you're not really throwing anything. I can't read it anymore, so I'm not entirely certain what it is. I believe it's pre-mixed Ford antifreeze. Put a tiny splash. Sierra's better. When you do that, remember there's 4 stages in there. So just turn it over, just spin that around. That's it. Okay, and then all we got left is a foam unit, which I gotta look at before I can even talk about, because I gotta figure out what one's in there.
Found a secret valve.
Fortunately, law enforcement was on scene to be very observant and showed us that labeled in everything, where is it? There it is. There's a discharge over here. 1.5-inch discharge. It's a really low spot, so we just opened it and that'll be enough. It's fine. Yeah, it's got downsloped everything. And then quarter turn all the valves. I don't try to quarter turn these drains, I just leave them open. Open, and this one's open. So that's your bypass. I will open that bypass back up. That stuff's all small brass and plastic lines, and there's not much in it. And after we blew everything out, there should be even less in it. But I just leave them open. Okay, that's it. All right, so the only other thing to winterize here is the foam unit, and I think we did a video on how to winterize a foam unit. This is the new, what do they call them? Darley Fast Foam 150. So there's a process to winterize that, and I don't remember what it is offhand because I haven't played with these things, and a lot of them are having trouble right now. Does yours work? Okay, we don't know. Generally, I don't worry too much about the foam freezing because it doesn't really freeze. It just gets extra jelly, but it tends to, loosen back up once it warms up. So I don't really worry about the foam concentrate. It's turned off at the tank, which is fine. The tank's pretty low, so it should be good. There's concentrate that runs back in here and into that system, and you can drain the tank, fill it with warm water, and I've done this. And then pump it through your system on the older style foam units, not the fast foam units, because those need water pressure to make the pump work. And I haven't, there is a way to override that. Again, it's a foam unit, and my mind's not wrapped around the foam unit at the moment. The only water that's in that system is a line that comes off from over here in front of the injection that runs back to the sensor that tells it what pressure the water's running at. And that's the only piece with any water in it, and you can't get to it to winterize it. So you just got to hope that it drains enough of it out to work. And it should, but I don't know. I guess we had them last year, didn't we? I don't think that was our problem with our foam units. I know we've had some problems. And then the only other thing you can do is pump the foam that's in the system out of it, and you can pump some antifreeze through that system so that your foam's out, won't gel up inside the pump. And that's that. We already did a video on how to do that, so we'll leave it at that. Any questions on winterizing? All right, follow the water, blow everything out, top to bottom. Always worked for me. So, cool.